Yes, thank you, Anthony. So it was really just to say thanks very much for joining and welcome to the workshop. I'm Zoe from Northgate Training, and Mike and Jill are also on the call. And really this workshop came about because I asked, and Anthony kindly agreed to share some of his experiences of using Zoom for virtual training. So he's going to now take us through a 40-minute session, and then we'll have a Q&A. So I hope you find it useful, and Anthony, over to you.
Thank you very much, Zoe, and thanks for inviting me to facilitate this. It's a pleasure to see you all. Folks, I hope you're going to forgive me. We're not going to go around the room and do introductions. This is not a sales pitch. I want to make sure we crowbar as much content into this time as we possibly can. By all means, if you have questions as we go through, please don't be shy. Feel free to chip in with the questions. We will have a Q&A session at the end, and this is going to be quite interactive, so you will have an opportunity to experiment and play with some of the features as they come through. I'm just letting Sam into the room as I'm talking, so Sam will join us hopefully in just a couple of moments, which would be great. Sam, good morning. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. You are extremely welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. No, it's all good. Don't worry about it. It's fine. In terms of the content and the suggested format for what we're going to cover off, I'm going to start, I guess, with a little bit of functionality. I'm not sure, actually, how familiar are you with Zoom? Have we got any Zoom experts in the room, or are people quite new to it? Are we a mixed bag? Okay. All fair to middling. All I would say is every day is a school day. We all know that. So as we're going through, if any of you have any top tips or shortcuts or things that you know of, please throw them all in. I don't want to just talk at you for 40 minutes. But for anyone that's perhaps not seen Zoom before, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a clue as to how you can get started with it, and just some of the settings that are important to enable you to use some of the functions that I'm going to demonstrate. There's a number of things that we can look at. We can look at polling. I'm going to show you how you can use a whiteboard as if you were in a real classroom environment. Breakout rooms. So again, that's a bit of a game changer really in terms of making learning interactive. And then some of the practical things. Angie is glamorously demonstrating the virtual background and how to do that and how not to do that, and things like that. So I'll go through some of the settings with regards to that. With regards to the breakout rooms, I'm going to put you into some breakout rooms, and that will just give you 5 minutes or so to have a play around and have the delegate or user experience of what it's like to be in a breakout room. And then what I'd like to do as well, if I may, is just very briefly demonstrate one of the Northgate activities I've been using for years actually. And then I suddenly had this conundrum of, eek, how do I use this virtually? So I got in touch with Jill and Zoe, and we had a conversation, and through Northgate's help, we managed to come up with a way of using it virtually. So I thought I'd do a really quick demo just as an example to show you how that works and the sorts of things that you can do through that as well. Is that all right? Zoe, I'm now going to lock the meeting. So again, if you can just kindly keep an eye on anyone that might be joining us, that would be really super helpful. So that's just from a security perspective. Okay, so if you all look towards the bottom of your screens, you should see some little messages that will come up, things like mute, stop video, and you should have an option that says share screen. So any one of you can do that. I'll ask you to refrain from doing it just now, but what I am going to do is share my screen, so just to demonstrate how I'm doing that. And basically, in order to share the screen, you need to have certain options open or certain screens open. So if it's a PowerPoint slide or if it's a web page, which is what I'm about to show you in a moment. So what I'm going to do is share my screen with you, and with a bit of luck, you should very quickly be able to see a Zoom page. Now, at this stage, I must point out, because I'm sharing my screen, I cannot see all of you. So if any of you are looking and gesturing to me to ask a question, I'm not as ignorant as you may be led to believe. I just can't see you. So just call your name out or just shout out and I'll come to you. So the reason I'm showing you this is because I'm not affiliated to Zoom, by the way. I've been running their learning development consultancy for the last 15 years, but I've used lots of platforms, Zoom being one of them, been using Zoom for a couple of years now for things like business coaching. I've used Blue Jeans, I've used Teams, Adobe Connect, and various other ones out there. And I personally feel that the functionality on Zoom allows me to do far more. So this is my my personal preferred choice. For anyone not familiar with Zoom, there are lots of different versions. The good news is there is a free version, and that enabled you to do a lot of the functionality I'm going to share with you. The difference, however, being with the free account, you cannot have any more than a meeting lasting any more than 40 minutes. And there's also a limit on how many delegates you can have at a time. I've upgraded to something called Zoom Pro. What that essentially means is I can have unlimited meeting time and unlimited delegates, and it does give you a broader range of functions. The cost at the moment is $11.99 a month, or you can actually purchase a 12-month subscription for just over £100 at a slight discount. So that's to give you an idea of the pricing. What I'm showing you at the moment is what you need to set up. So all I've done is I've Googled Zoom and I've logged in. So if you set up an account, as you would expect, you'll have a login, and it brings you to this stage. So on this meetings page, these are some of the meetings that I've got lined up coming up. Nobody panic, is I'm hosting a quiz later on this evening. It's a panic room quiz. So just in case you're wondering what that is. But the settings bit is what we're really interested in, and there are a few things I want to really draw your attention to that are quite useful. So all you've got is a basic click on, click off function here. So the couple of things to have in mind is if you're facilitating, it's always good to have your video on. So to save you having to keep turning it on each time, you just click that button and it enables you to do that. Same with participants video. Some of you are not showing your camera at the moment, which is absolutely fine, but it just proves that you can actually have control as a delegate as to whether you want to be seen or not. I'm not going to go through all of these because we will literally be here all day, but a couple of things I do want to bring your attention to. Number one is to enable a meeting ID. Now, you can either have your own personal meeting ID, or you can set up a general one for each meeting. So if I wanted to schedule a meeting, for example, just could go on to that, I can put the name of the meeting in here, the time, the date, and so on. If you scroll down, you'll see at the moment I've got to default generate automatically, and that's just an extra security meeting. If you just have your own personal meeting ID and someone gets hold of that, then that's when you're potentially at risk of security. So this just generates a new code each time, as does the password, which you would have had as well. All right, so just to focus on that as well. So back to settings, a couple of other things that you'll need to click in order to keep yourself able to use the functions. So I'm just going to go down to, bear with me. So yeah, so one of the options is chat. So Amanda's unable to use her audio at the moment, but she has used the chat function to explain that's the case. So that's because it's enabled on my system. So you want to make sure that's clicked. You also want to make sure, if you want to use polling, and I'll demonstrate how that works in a moment, that's switched on. So that's there. The other thing you definitely want to have on is annotation and whiteboard. That will enable you, excuse me, to have a whiteboard, which again we're going to have a little look at and a little play with. And the other all-important one that you need to have is breakout rooms. So again, if you've got the free account, I believe I'm right in saying you can't use the polling function, but you can use breakout rooms. I'm willing to be proven wrong on that. But obviously it's personal choice, but for £100 a year, it does really open up the door to loads more functionality. So if budget allows, that would be my personal recommendation. So I'm just going to stop sharing the screen and bring that back to everybody. So that's just from a setup point of view, where you would go first. I have to say, and again, I'm not affiliated to Zoom, they have got some really useful YouTube videos that they've created of how to, and they're not patronizing. I'm a bit of a technophobe, I'm not going to lie. So if I can use it, trust me, anybody can. So they are a good place to go to. They're free, just sat on their website. The other thing that I wanted to just briefly draw your attention to, and you can all have a play with this at the moment, at the bottom of your screen, you should say something that says stop video, and next to it there's a little arrow pointing up. If you click on that little arrow, you should see a little menu that will come up. And the first thing I want you to look at is right at the bottom, it should say video settings. If any of you are on an iPad right now, it might look slightly differently, but if you click on video settings, you'll see a little menu bar comes up, and probably a little box with your face in it. So give yourself a cheesy grin, and you'll see that there are things like enable HD and, controversially, touch up my appearance. And all that does is it makes the screen look a little bit clearer. That's not from a vanity point of view, it just means that when people are dialing in, it just makes it look a little bit more professional, I guess. So you can play around with some of the settings on there as well.
It's showing on there.
Okay. Also, you'll notice at the bottom, spotlight my video when I speak. So all that basically means is when you're talking, it just highlights you or whoever else is talking. The other thing, if you just click to the top right of that, just click out of that box, so you're back to where you were at the beginning. Again, if you go to stop video and just next to it, click that arrow again, you'll see a box that says choose virtual background, which is what Angie has done. And if you click on that, you can play around. Now I'm about to demonstrate how it doesn't work. So if I now go into space or in a field or indeed into San Francisco, you can see lots of distraction in the background and it doesn't always work. Personally, what I have done is I've just purchased from Amazon, and you can spend as little as £10 or £150 on it. I went for the £30 version, a green screen, which I'm just going to pop behind me. Now, I fell into the trap of purchasing this because it said dispatch within 2 to 3 working days, which I thought was great. The small print told me it's due to arrive on June 29th. Not so good. So forgive me, I don't have that in time for today. But the reason behind that is what I'm personally going to do is I'm going to have my company logo behind me, and also, because I facilitate to different clients, the logo of the client that perhaps I'm facilitating with. And you can download all sorts of free options as well. So again, it doesn't take a huge amount, but if you want to professionalize the setting, or you're perhaps not as comfortable having people coming into your living room or your study or wherever you're working from, it just gives you some more options. Or you can make it look a little bit more corporate as well. If you can't wait for that, what some of my colleagues are doing, they've got, you know, the old-fashioned projector screens that they kind of fold into themselves and you can lift out. You can stick one of those behind you. So I've been chatting to somebody for a few weeks now, hadn't realised they were doing it, and then they suddenly realised we were in their shoe cupboard. So it's amazing what you can kind of create from a virtual perspective, as it were. Any questions at this stage on that? We will do Q&A at the end, obviously, but I've dumped a lot on you there quite quickly. Jules?
Yeah. I'm not seeing. I'm on an iPad and I'm not seeing what you're suggesting. I've paid for Pro, and I've had that a couple of weeks or so. But when I go on share content, the only options I've got are screen, photos, iCloud, website, bookmark, and whiteboard.
Right, okay. Have you got any files open, Jules?
No.
So it might be worth you trying just opening up a file.
Yeah.
By all means do it in the background, and we can come back to it perhaps later in the Q&A. Because what you normally need to do is what should happen is when you share screen, anything you've got open in the background, you have the opportunity of clicking onto. Yeah. Now I will confess, I don't use an iPad, I use a laptop for this. So you may well have stumbled across something.
Yeah,
but
our works won't support Zoom.
Right. Okay. And that's obviously another kind of challenge that some of us have got to overcome.
At the moment, should I say?
At the moment. Okay. Show them this video afterwards; they'll be blown away. I can assure you. So. But yeah, come back to me later on that if that's not working.
Anthony, could I ask a question about?
Of course you can, Alison.
About the passwords, because I just clicked on the link and came straight into the room, so I didn't enter any passcode at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason I think this has happened in this particular scenario, I don't have your full names, because this is not an opportunity to suddenly bombard you with mail and things you don't want. So what Zoe's kindly provided me with is literally your first names and the organisation that you're representing. That meant that I was unable to send the link for this workshop out to you directly. So what Zoe has kindly done is forwarded it on. Now my suspicion is what's happened is, because she's forwarded the link on, that hasn't necessarily asked you to do the password. So it depends how that was sent out. The added layer of security is, because I've got your names, as you've all come into the meeting, your name has come up and I can either admit you or say, actually, this doesn't look quite right, so I can prevent you from joining. And also I've locked the meeting as well. But ordinarily, Alice, it's a really good question. I'm glad you've asked it. Ordinarily, if you send a link out directly, everybody should have to enter the passcode.
Okay.
From that point of view.
Thank you.
But no, it's a great shout. I'm sure you're not the only one wondering that as well. So thank you for raising that. Okay. So a couple of other things that I want to demonstrate to you. So this whiteboard function, you should all have that. And Jules has just alluded to that. Can I have a volunteer, please, Vicky? Just because you're in the center of my screen, Vicky, no other reason from that. If you could kindly hover towards the bottom of your screen, Vicky, you should see something that says share screen. If you'd be kind enough to click on that, and then there should be an option for you to click on whiteboard. And if you'd be kind enough to click on that for me.
Yeah. My daughter has just walked in the room.
That's fine. That's fine. Listen, if you want to delegate, crack on. It's
I'm
all
pressing.
good.
My husband's just grabbing with a nice screen.
No, it's all
We've got
good.
a whiteboard. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, what everybody else can see, Vicky's got a slightly different view, but all we can see at the moment is a white screen and what looks like a pencil that Vicky's hovering around. Now, Vicky, you should see at the top something that says text. If you'd be kind enough to click on that for me, what that will present is a text box, which we will see. And then if you can just type in anything you like, keep it clean, family show. There we go. Perfect. Now already Vicky's realized she's OCD clearly like me. If you hit the return key as Vicky's done, it gives you a nice line. If you hit return again, it gives you a lovely little space. So what this enables you to do as a facilitator is, if you are capturing key learning points from your delegates, you can actually type that in as a speaking. So it's essentially the equivalent of you having a flip chart or a whiteboard in the room. As you'll see when we go into the breakout rooms, your delegates will also have the functionality of using this whiteboard. Okay, and also what Vicky will see, which we can't at the moment, but you can play with it later, is an option to save the screen. So if you wanted to save that, and what will happen is it will directly go into the Zoom folder. So you can then, as a later stage, let's say we're doing a breakout activity and you want to share your thoughts, you can then come back and actually share that with everybody else. Okay. Yep. So it's the closest you're going to get really to having a whiteboard or a flip chart in the room. If you could kindly click stop sharing now for me, that's super. And it's literally as simple as that. And again, I'll give you an opportunity to play with that a little bit later on as well. So that's the whiteboard function. The other one, which is a little bit of a game changer, and at the moment you can't use this on things like Teams, is breakout rooms. So what I'm going to do is put you into breakout rooms. I'm going to kind of talk you through how I'm doing it. You're not going to be able to see on the screen what I'm doing, but I'm going to give you an idea of what's happening. So if you remember in the settings section, I clicked on breakout rooms, so that's now enabled the function. So along the bottom of my panel, I have a button which is imaginatively called Breakout Rooms. Okay, so I'm just going to click on that, and when that comes up, it tells me immediately how many participants there are, and it gives me the option of how many rooms I'd like to set up. So it's telling me that there are 11 participants. So what I'm going to do for this exercise, I'm going to set up 3 breakout rooms. Okay. Now, it then says, do you want to set these delegates up randomly or automatically, or do you want to do it manually? Now, because we don't really know each other, I'm just going to go for the automatic option today. But yesterday, for example, I was running a leadership program and there were 2 delegates, one of whom reports into the other. And for a couple of activities, it wasn't really that appropriate for them to both be in the same team. So that gives me the function of moving people into different teams. So I'm going to create 3 automatic rooms. So what that's telling me now, for example, is that in one room, Bims and Sam and Zoe, you're going to be working together in one room. Okay. Now, what will happen in a moment is I'm going to click on a button that says open all rooms, and you're all going to have an invite to join that room. It takes a few moments, and then you will appear exactly the same format, but in a separate breakout room. Okay, so essentially I'm going to chop you in half. I have about an 83% success rate of putting people back together again, so you should all be absolutely fine, but we'll worry about that later on. And what I'd like to do is just put you into the rooms, and I'm going to demonstrate a few things when you're in the room. So the purpose is really for you to have a little chat amongst yourselves and a little play. You should all be able to have a go at, for example, using the whiteboard. I'm going to broadcast a message to you, so I have the option of sending out to all of you. And I'm going to hop in and out of the rooms as well, just to jump in and say hi and make sure you're okay. So I can move around the rooms as the host, just as I would do if we had normal breakout rooms. And I was doing a session for one of the Royal Colleges earlier this week, and they have often meetings that take 2 or 3 days. And what they found is that this is a great way of using this function because they're really short on meeting rooms. So the functionality of using this has become a little bit of a game changer for them. So it's not just for training. If any of you are hosting quizzes, I coach a kids football team. We did a quiz on Monday night when we would have been training. And again, we put them into teams and put them into different breakout rooms. And they loved it because it's just that kind of interactive experience. So let me put you into the rooms.
Anthony,
Yes.
it's Sam here. Before you jump us into breakout rooms, are you able to share your screen so we can see what that page looks like?
I can't.
And you can, okay, I didn't know whether you could. Okay.
Actually, do you know what? I might be able to do that. Let's try it. Can you see that?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you, because I've learned something. In which case, let's go back to the beginning and I'll show you what I was doing. Let me stop sharing for a moment. And let's see if I can do that again and actually demonstrate how I'm doing it. I'm not sure if it's going to work or not.
That was the settings screen.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? No, it's not going to let me do it. Not going to let me do it. That's weird. I need to play around with that. That was a cracking question. So let me just do that again. So I'll talk you through it again. So I'm clicking on breakout rooms. I'm then going to click on automatic, or how many rooms I want. So I've got 3 breakout rooms. I'm then going to click on automatic. And then I'm going to open up the room for you. All good with that?
Yep.
So when you get the invite, you just click on yes, please. Okay, so for those of you watching this on video, I mentioned that I can broadcast a message to everybody. So I'm just going to, there's a button that's come up saying broadcast a message to all. So I'm just going to type in a little bit of a message to everybody. Okay, so I've just written here, as you can see, you have the option of broadcasting to all, for example, to remind them how much time they have to complete an activity. You simply click on broadcast and a message goes out to everybody. So I'm just now going to join each of the breakout rooms.
Yeah, go back in there.
All right.
First back, gold star.
So where's everybody else? Are they
I think
waiting?
I think
So
if
what
you
I've
wait,
done is
if you
I've put
wait,
a-
it. Am I right, Anthony? If you wait, it puts you back automatically, but if you click on the button, it takes you back.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Ah,
Yeah.
right.
So I put a 60-second warning out. You can adapt the time or the length of that according to what you want to do. So
Yeah.
yeah, we've had people having fun on whiteboards and annotating and all sorts. So
Yeah,
Yes.
we had some very artistic people in our room.
Yes.
I'm just hoping the other group come back now. Yes, we've got a full house. Thank goodness for that. I'm not sure what the insurance is for not getting people back. So perfect. So you've all had a chance to have a little play with that, and you've noticed that a little message popped up saying you now have 60 seconds. You can adapt the length of that. So when you're setting up your breakout rooms, if you wanted it to be a 3-minute warning or a 2-minute warning, you can do so. And as has just been explained, Alison's group, you don't have to wait for the 60 seconds. You can leave the room and come straight back, as this group did, or you can wait for the 60 seconds. And you'll have seen that I sent a message out to all of you as well earlier on. So you simply go to breakout rooms, a message says broadcast message. You've got limited characters that you can type in, so you can't write an essay. And away you go. And the other thing that you may or may not have discovered when you're in the breakout room is towards the bottom, you can call the host or the facilitator. So if somebody's stuck on an exercise or we're not quite sure what we're doing, what would come up? So let's say Jules, for example, had pressed that. It would actually come up with Jules's name. And I get a little message, and you simply click the button next to Jules's name, and bingo, you're in the breakout room. So you've got to be careful people don't abuse that privilege. Obviously, it's a bit exhausting hopping back and forth, but it's good. And also, from the facilitator's point of view, it gives you a breathing space, as you would normally do when delegates are doing an activity, to think, right, where are we in terms of timings? What's next? Checking that everybody's still engaged. All the usual things that we should be doing as facilitators.
And Anthony, just checking on that, how easy is it to jump into the different rooms? Is it just a list then that you see once it's been and you just jump in and join, and leave?
Absolutely, it's exactly that. Great question, thanks, Sam. So when you click on breakout rooms, I can see there's a little green dot next to everyone's name to know that they've joined that particular room. And so Vicky, you hadn't joined for a couple of seconds, so you're just on, your camera wasn't on, so I can see if somebody hasn't joined a room. And then next to it, it just says join. So you go into the room, same experience that you had, a message comes up saying this may take a few moments. And then when I want to leave that room, you just click on leave breakout room, as you did, takes you back to the main room, and then you go in again to join the other room if you want to do so. So yeah, it's quite handy. All good?
Yeah.
Zoe, you found something quite funky. Can I ask you to explain very quickly, if you don't mind, what you were working on?
It was a very exciting discovery that Bims and Sam and I made, which was that when we were using the whiteboard function, so one of us had the whiteboard open. If the others went to the person with it open could obviously write on it. And if the others, we went to the top of our screen, there was a little drop down arrow. And one of the options said annotate, and then all of us could work on the whiteboard. So that was quite nice. So we could all, and then we could all see what each other have put on the whiteboard.
Well, we did that.
Yeah, we did that. I don't think we realised how we did it.
We stumbled across it.
Well,
we were all adding stuff to the whiteboard at the same time.
and again, I think therein lies the challenge. It's about how you want to facilitate. I think that can be really collaborative. Personally, if I'm in a live room and there's a big whiteboard, I'm a big fan of everybody getting stuck in out of their chairs and putting post-it notes and goodness knows what else there. I think, as always, it just depends on how you want to facilitate it. But the rule of thumb generally is, it's like PowerPoint. You can do so many things with it, and most of it's a distraction. And I think it's about keeping it as simple as possible for you. And ultimately, it's the end user experience that you want to have in mind. Make sure it's interactive. Nobody should be sat doing nothing for any more than 6-7 minutes anyway, keeping people engaged. and so on. And this just gives you the opportunity to get people to get stuck in and so on. So what I'd like to do now, before we come to a general Q&A piece, is just very quickly demonstrate one of the activities I've used. And so the background to this is I've been using an activity called listening skills, which some of you perhaps already familiar with it. For those that are not, I'll explain how it works. Been using this for a while. My pack is pretty moth-eaten now. It's been used, well worn for quite a while. And the premise of the activity is you put your delegates into groups of 5, and each delegate is given a brief. And I'll give you an example of the brief, actually. I can share it on the screen with you. And I should say at this point that normally it's a handwritten or it's a typed out brief. I spoke with good friends at Northgate, and what they've very kindly done is provided me with a PDF version of this. Okay, so this is something I now email out to people. But on the brief, in this case, you can see you're part of an organization, you're about to attend a meeting, and you have some objectives for the meeting. Okay. And then it tells you who's actually attending and who's not. And the idea basically is that they don't all like each other. So some of them have got the right hump with each other. Some of them are really big fans of each other. And they all want different things from the meeting. So they want to spend their budget differently. Some want to move and relocate, some don't, and so on. So the idea is you get the brief. You're not allowed to show anybody else what's on your brief. Now, just to make it really interesting, each person is given 10 coloured counters, so they're colour coordinated, so that brief was red, so that person would have red counters. And they're their tokens to speak. So if you want to speak in the meeting, you take one of your tokens and you put it in a little plastic pot. Nobody else can speak at that point. So you either get scenarios where everyone's very polite and wait till you finish speaking, or as the meeting progresses, people start lobbing in their counters and so on. Now, if you run out of counters, you can no longer speak in the meeting. So it gets quite interesting. I normally have an observer, which is great if you've got odd numbers, and their role is twofold. Number one, to observe the behavior with the counters. So we get some hoverers. You get people that are secreting their counters under the page. I had one recently where someone had hidden their counters and everyone thought they'd run out, and then they went ha at the end and slam dumped their counter in and fired everybody else. And the other thing they asked to do is to write down how many questions people ask. And when you brief that into people, they look at you like, how many? Yeah, as many as you can. Normally they won't ask more than 2 or 3 questions. Okay. There's then a second part to the activity which nobody knows about, including the observer, which is a quiz. And the quiz asks certain questions such as what was the main objective of the marketing director? What does the HR director think of the R&D director, and so on and so forth. And generally speaking, people will score quite low. And the reasons are because we get focused on our own agenda. We don't have enough time to prepare. We're too busy waiting our turn, politics. And crucially, we don't ask enough questions. So the whole point is to see the view of the other person. So there's some cracking learning points in that. And it's a game I've used on sales courses, on leadership courses, persuading and influencing. So of course, when COVID kicks in and we're running these remotely, it's what to do. And so I picked the phone up and we had a conversation with Northgate. So what I've done, and I'll be honest, it's fairly rustic, but it kind of works, is first of all, it's great to have the PDF version of the workbook. So during a break, I simply email people their individual briefs. So you have to check first of all that they've got access to email. If not, you can send it to them beforehand. So I give them no time to prepare, to look at it. And what I've then done is explain the activity. And in terms of the counters, all I've done, I'll show you a quick example. So this is the activity, is I have just simply created, it's going to go back a stage here actually, because this is what I did earlier. So in this case, I've got 4 people, 10 counters. So let's say our marketing director, Red, speaks first. I literally delete. Then our managing director kicks in, and then our production director kicks in. And so what you can actually start to see is, oh, hang on, I'm running out of counters. Now, you can vary this. So there's some groups, I only give them 5 counters. It's always a maximum of 10. Now, if I've got 2 groups of people, all I need to do is take a copy of that slide and email it to the observer. They then share their screen, and then they control the counters, and there's a host I flip between different rooms. So I guess the reason for sharing that with you is just to demonstrate that just because we are not in a real life environment, you can take loads of activities and actually just tweak it, and it makes for a really interactive activity. And the feedback, I have to say, not just because of present company on the call, the feedback has been absolutely spot on. People have really enjoyed it, and so on and so forth. So just wanted to share that as one example of how you can use some of these interactive activities. Clearly some are going to work better than others, as you would expect, but there's loads of them that can actually be applied differently. So I just thought I'd share that as an example. So that's pretty much everything I had planned on showing you. We've got 15 minutes left for any questions you've got, challenges, pushback, either from an L&D perspective, anything specific to Northgate. We've got some representatives from Northgate on the call as well. So fill your boots. Anything you want to ask?
So I had a question. There's a training that I run for my company, which is about presentation skills, and it's very much an interactive thing. There's one particular part where I actually get each of the delegates to stand up to do something called the Lighthouse Technique, where they've got to scan the audience and make sure they're making eye contact. Obviously something like that is basically impossible in the virtual world, but what would your recommendation be for something like that, where you do want a little bit more physical interaction with them as part of the training?
I'm smiling because, funny enough, I did exactly this with one of the Royal Colleges only this week. We did a half-day session on presentation skills, and we talked about, funny enough, the Lighthouse Technique. But what we did is we adapted that from a virtual perspective. So I guess the first thing to say is, I think, listen, no one's got a crystal ball in front of them, but my suspicion is that this whole virtual learning thing and presenting virtually is going to become more and more prevalent. So I think, first of all, there's an opportunity to adapt your sessions to present virtually as well. And there are sort of things like, at the moment, I'm looking down at my keyboard at my notes and you can't see me. We have a tendency to look at people on the screen instead of looking at the webcam, which is now looking directly at you. But I think there are different things you can do. So I, for example, get people to read out a Persian proverb to work on their pitch and their pace and the projection. So you can still share that screen. The other thing you can then do is put people into breakout rooms and say, right, what I want you to do now is deliver your presentation in smaller groups and give each other some feedback. You've got the option of recording the sessions as well for future feedback. So the point you're making is absolutely spot on, Mike. You can't suddenly recreate a Lighthouse Technique in a room, but I think I would personally be looking at how you adapt it to presenting virtually, as many of us are going to be doing.
Sure. Anthony, one of the things that somebody told me is that one of the main distractions of presenting virtually is when you can see yourself. So that makes you look down at the screen because you can see yourself, because you're always constantly checking, you know, do I look okay, whatever. And somebody told me to put a post-it over the part of the screen where your image is. So that means you then look at the camera, and that works really well because it's so much less distracting. It depends on the setup. So with Zoom, it looks like people move around. So that you might be moving post-its here, there, and everywhere as and when you want to show a screen. But I think not the other people you look at, it is yourself that you look at. So I think covering that up is quite useful. That's a really good shout. Thank you for sharing, Alison. And that also reminds me that you can share the view of the screen. So at the moment, I've got you all on full screen, so I can see you as large as life as possible. But you can change the view as well. So you can all play around the settings. My suspicion is we've all got slightly different views. If you play around with that.
But no, that's a good point. You've also reminded me, as a complete aside, Zoom is a great tool. Oh, somebody's got kicked out of the meeting. I need to let them back in. Bear with me a moment. Can you ask them to try again for me, Zoe, and I'll see if I can let them in. Yeah, if you're doing things for social media, so for example, doing a presentation, or for example, I interviewed a client of mine who's in the health and wellbeing industry, and they had some great tips on health and wellbeing for remote workers, and we just set it up through Zoom from an interview perspective. So you can use it for all sorts of stuff like that, which is quite handy. But the reason I mention it, Alison, you remind me that it is tempting to be drawn to your face and forget that you're actually looking at a camera. So yeah, it's a good shout.
Anthony, I've put a couple of questions in chat, if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely fine. Forgive me if I'm looking slightly distracted because I'm trying to let somebody back in. I can't see them trying to get back in at the moment, Zoe. Let me try and unlock the meeting again.
I've just emailed Vicky to say try again, so she
should be able to try now because I've unlocked the meeting again. So forgive me, Wendy Ann. I'm just trying to let someone back in, and then hopefully Vicky can join us again. Right, I've unlocked the meeting now, so she should be able to get back in, Zoe. Go on, Wendy Ann. What was your question, or your questions, I should say?
Yeah, the first question for me was, if you're running a kind of all-day session, so I've got kind of 7 hours of training that I'm trying to now squeeze into, 4 or 5, and I've juggled or redesigned so that we can do a kind of morning session, mid-morning and then an afternoon. Yep. But would you recommend leaving the meeting open all day and people kind of just to go off and do their thing, or would you suggest people dial out, have a formal break and then dial back in? What's your experience of the kind of running of the system?
Great question. So my experience has been, Vicky's just coming back in, Zoe. My experience has been that 3.5 hours is normally the maximum that people can really focus and concentrate on. So what I've been tending to do, Vicky, my apologies.
Sorry, I don't know.
No, it's all right. I had to check you had the right shoes on before I could let you back in. So apologies for that.
It's fine. Apologies.
So we're just talking about
technology.
we're just talking about the length of time that typically somebody would run a session. So I found, Wendy Ann, that typically 3.5 hours. So where I've had a full day session, I've tried to set some pre-work. So for example, watch a TED talk beforehand, or we did one recently where there's an activity around how would you measure the success of a people leader. So I set out 3 or 4 activities and said it'd be helpful if you could give some thought to this. Mm-hmm. And what I've been doing is running them in half-day sessions. As a facilitator, I've split the delegates in 2.
Yeah.
So I've had 5 or 6 delegates in the morning, and then I've run exactly the same session in the afternoon. So as a facilitator, I'm doing 7 hours worth, but the delegate experience is a bit more intense. And again, it depends on budget and so on, but that, in my personal experience, has been about right. I did try it longer once, and I felt people were flagging, even with different activities. And I'll be honest, so was I.
Okay. And if you set them into groups, so they're doing group activities like we just did then in the breakouts, you mentioned recording. So how does that work? Do they record the breakout as a separate kind of meeting, or do you get a recording of everything that happens during the time it's been recording?
Right. So I've only done the recording twice. For that, and they were both, funny enough, the presentations that Mark mentioned. So what I ended up doing, and there may be a quick way of doing this, so I'm open to suggestions on this, folks, is I set up a separate Zoom meeting for them, and they recorded, so they were in their own separate group, and then they simply recorded themselves. Okay. I'm not sure that Zoom has the functionality to record separate meetings at the same time. So the way I got around that was just setting up a separate Zoom meeting for them. So they were doing something that afternoon.
Yeah. Okay.
There may be other ways around it, but that's how I tackled it.
Great. Thank you.
No, thank you. Great questions. Thank you. Anybody else got any questions or?
Just one thing to share with you and anybody else. I shared it in our little breakout room. So apologies, guys, you're hearing it again. My corporation, we use Teams entirely. We can't use Zoom. But I was on a training course last week where we had quite a lot of people and they wanted to use breakout rooms. So what they did, we had the main meeting running in Teams, but as their pre-work, they'd made a team that we all joined, and then we had individual channels.
Right.
And that channel was then our breakout room. So you can join that and meet within that channel without exiting the main meeting. And then obviously you've got the benefits of putting all your shared files in and stuff like that to do your collaborative work. And then when you leave that breakout, it immediately asks if you want to rejoin the main meeting. And then obviously within that, the facilitators can bounce within the rooms, and you can use the at mentions to get their attention if you need help that way. So that was working really well, apart from me, where my version of Office wasn't quite right, so I couldn't collaborate fully. So I had to do my bit offline and then wait for someone else to copy and paste all of my stuff in, and then I was telling them where to move my things, which was a bit awkward. But
yeah, it gets a bit. I mean, I don't know. My suspicion is that the likes of Teams will probably look at all the other functionality, and I'm hoping everybody will look to up their game. It would be fantastic if all of these platforms had this functionality. The only other one I've worked with, which enables you to use breakout rooms, is something called Blue Jeans, and that's all one word. And I must admit, when I first started using it, I took that as it was a dress down day. I didn't actually realise it was something called Blue Jeans, so more fool me. What I discovered there is that if delegates try to leave the room themselves, they literally just get kicked off. So again, in that scenario, the quirk in that system is you need to physically control when people can come back. So I think every system has its pros and cons. And I think ultimately, we've used Zoom today as a tool. It's about finding the one that works well for you and the preferences. The security thing does frustrate me slightly, because you know what it's like, 2 or 3 things happen and of course everybody jumps on it. Both my children do karate, and they've been having their karate lessons through Zoom, and there's no way I'd let my children anywhere near it if I figured that there were going to be a potential security breach. I think it's like anything, as long as it's well managed. But similarly, 100% got to respect the views of organisations and IT departments and so on and so forth. So it's taking the best of what we've looked at today and saying, how do I adapt that to a Teams or Adobe or whichever system that you're actually using. But the good news is you can do stuff like that. It doesn't just have to be WebEx talking at people. And I think for the likes of our good sales, that's pretty exciting.
I've got a question, just kind of thoughts and opinions. I'm looking at using we use one of the Northgate games, the decision games, as part of a recruitment assessment centre. We also do things like, your in-trays, your group exercises. So I'm kind of looking at it as from an angle of how we would use Zoom, but also or kind of virtual assessment centres, and using the even some of the Northgate games as part of that. And I just wondered, have you got any opinions around that kind of, has anybody had any experience in doing anything like that? Or
I think, Zoe, I'll hand over to you. All I would say before I do is that the demo I've given you, the listening skill, there's one of about 3 activities that I've managed to adapt. So my personal view is that some more than others, but yeah, it's definitely possible. But Zoe, perhaps I can hand over to you to answer that.
Yes, because actually since we'd had a conversation about decisions, we've actually been trialing it, and it is, I'd say, at the more complex end of our games, because it has a computer program, as you know, which you as the trainer, or usually the delegates, input their decisions and outcomes, a consequence, and then the delegates have to look at the next challenge and the next decision and so on, and it goes through a series of decisions. And we've successfully trialed it through Zoom by the delegates send me their decisions, I input them into the computer program and send them back the results by printing to PDF. And it's quite quick once you get the hang of it, but it is, as for a facilitator, it is a challenge, because you are having to manage the files. And then I can attach them via the chat function to breakout rooms by attaching a file and just hitting send. And then in the breakout room, they would all be able to open up the file and read it. But I haven't done it with lots yet, and I think it would be a good one to start with practicing before launching
Yeah.
to a lot of people.
Can I just quickly ask Vicky, when you're running that, particularly things like assessment centres, are you do you have colleagues working with you, or are you kind of flying solo?
No, so normally the decisions one, for example, we've got 2 candidates that work on that together, and we have an observer. So we've got to kind of think about how we would do that, because obviously they're ultimately being assessed, one on the output, but secondly on how they interact together as well.
Yeah, because all I was thinking is whether you could have an additional head who could perhaps be responsible. Let's say Zoe's sending back the data, and then you're focusing on making sure the candidates. It's I think it's just a little bit of flexing.
Yeah, we need to think about it. Yeah. It's just thinking outside the box, really, in the world that we're in, really. So
big time.
Maybe Vicky, we can always do a trial with you at some point.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That's a good question. Folks, I'm conscious it's midday. Some of you may need to drop off. I'm very happy to stay back for a few minutes later if anybody has any other questions. But if anybody is sat there thinking, I'm feeling awkward, I need to go now, don't be. We'll just talk about it when you've gone. It'll be absolutely fine. But if we do lose anybody, it's been an absolute pleasure working with you all. Thank you so much for taking the time to join, and I hope you've got enough from it to make it worthwhile. An hour of your life you're never getting back, but hopefully you'll be able to use stuff from it. So thank you to Zoe for inviting me to facilitate it. So.
Yeah, no, thanks, and thanks to Anthony, and just to reiterate, thanks to everyone for joining, and hope you found it useful.
Anthony, can I just ask, will the video be going to the people who've participated as well? Because I have colleagues who'd like to see it.
Zoe, I'll nod to you on that one.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we'll. I'll definitely make sure you all get a copy.
Okay, it's just that colleagues have asked me to feedback, and I think it's probably best if they just watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've done not a huge amount, but when you were in breakout rooms, so for example, when I was typing in the message to you, I've for anyone watching on video, I've been saying, right, this is what I'm doing now. So to try and make it a little bit more user friendly for anyone that is watching on video. So if you are still persevering and watching us on video, you already know that because you've seen it, but now it's getting weird. So
Anthony, can I just ask a quick question?
Of course you can.
So I'm, as I've already said, using iPad. Do you think that the functionality of Zoom is better on a laptop? Do you think it's worth trying to get a laptop that I can use Zoom on if I'm going to use it for training purposes?
I can only base it on personal experience. But
yeah,
that would be my gut feel.
Yeah, because I've tried to before today. I've tried to do a PowerPoint, so I've got PowerPoint on my iPad. I don't use my iPad for work; it's just for personal use. Yeah. So I've got a PowerPoint there, but I can't, for the life of me, get it to come up on Zoom. Cannot. Right. I can have it open; it's there. I cannot get it to link. The only way I did it in the end was to take pictures, so take a photograph of each of my slides. I fortunately only had 5 slides, and then I just had to keep going and sharing my pictures and then changing the picture.
Yeah, it's far from ideal. I mean, I would say if you're a participant, iPads are absolutely fine because it's essentially what we're looking at now. But yeah, I think as a host, as a host, I would suggest. Sorry, but that would be my recommendation, or based on my experience anyway.
Yeah.
You want to make life as easy for yourself as you possibly can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Cheers. Thank you.
I'll have a chat with Rory for you.
That'd be ideal. Because I've got a laptop, but the work laptop, we're not allowed to use Zoom because of the nature of what we do and security and all the rest of it. Yeah. But for the training that I'm doing, there's nothing sensitive in what I'm doing. So yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah, all right.
That's been really helpful.
No, thank you.
Good thank you very much.
Enjoyed it. Superb.
Thank you. Nice to meet everybody.
Yeah, likewise. Unless we've got any more questions, I'll close the meeting down. Okay. Thanks all. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Anthony.
Have a great bank holiday weekend.
Bye.
All right. Take care. Cheers. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.